Now, very quickly, the Institutional Review Board of Kirksville, as I tell people, we are a statutory organization. Then we are governed by regulations found on this website, hhs.gov-ohrp. The role of the IRB is to protect human subjects and assure that safety in human subject research is foremost, and to assure that subject participation is fully consensual. All right, that means that whatever you want to do to the subject, they have to understand and also agree to it. Okay, and some of the things that are very concepts that are very important is that human subjects and their private information they belong to themselves. They're not belong to the principal investigator. And no matter how valuable your research is, either objectively or subjectively in your viewpoint, it does not trump the rights of people to say no. All right. What I tell people when they're thinking about doing human subject research is talk to your local IRB and get the information. OHRP has defined a human subject as a living individual about whom an investigator is conducting research and obtains data either through interaction with that individual or some sort of intervention, or gathering information maybe from their medical records or something like that. And one of the things that people have to realize is that if you are doing something with human subjects, if you're working with human beings, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's research. Research, as defined by the government, is a systematic investigation that includes some sort of development or testing or evaluation, and it's designed to develop and or contribute to generalizable knowledge. In other words, if you're gathering information from a group of patients to find a way to treat them better, but you don't plan on publishing it, or you don't have it organized to the extent that it's really a well-defined program, you're just trying to make your maybe the way you do things in your office better, it's not necessarily research. And if it's not research, it's not going to fall under an IRB umbrella. That doesn't mean that other regulations may not be involved or come into play, but certainly it is not research. The informed consent, again, one of the things that the IRBs look at is making sure that everything that is done is understandable to the subject, and the subject completely agrees to it. So in other words, you have to have their consent, and that consent has to be informed. They have to understand what you want them to do, or what the project is about, and they have the right to say no. All right, permission from the volunteer is required. There are certain circumstances where an IRB may waive the necessity of an informed consent, but usually those involve things like emergency room procedures, or situations where there might be certain circumstances where the patient cannot provide informed consent. But those are extremely rare, and they have to be approved by an IRB to you before you can waive informed consent. The other thing is the consideration of volunteers that are not of legal age for the procedure. If the volunteer is a child up to age 17, or a person up to age 17, they are not considered an adult, and they don't have the full legal right to grant consent. However, if they understand and they're able to understand what you want to do to them and what you want them to do, they need to be able to grant permission. In other words, if you're working with maybe a group of 10-year-olds, and they say they don't want to do it, then you can't force them to do it, and their parents and guardians can't force them to do it. So the definitions that are involved here are things like consent, legally effective agreement of the subject or their legally authorized representative, given so that the study can be done, and the subject or the representative has to understand that. That means the language of the informed consent document has to be something that is written in language that the layperson can understand. And the federal government has really defined about a sixth grade education as the norm. All right. And again, as I mentioned, assent, a child, if they understand, if they can understand what you want them to participate in, they have to give agreement to their participation. Okay. Again, it's a statutory based system. 45 Code of Federal Regulations or the statutes that govern this for HHS. And there are other regulations, FDA regulations, and actually there are about 12 different agencies in the federal government that have sections of the Code of Federal Regulations that deal with research involving human subjects and protection of that. But the major ones are 45 CFR 46 and 21 CFR 50 and 56 for the FDA. All right. Now, in 2019, the government redid what's called the Common Rule, which is the Common Rule is actually 45 CFR 46 Part A, and changed a few things and made it somewhat a little easier to get permission to use to do human subject research, but it's not always that easier. Anyway, 45 CFR Part A, as I said, is the basic policy, and it defines the IRB, establishes guidelines for the IRB, record keeping, and so forth. And then subparts B through D define protected populations, things like pregnant women, fetuses, neonates in B, prisoners in C, and children in D. Any research involving these specialized defined protected populations cannot be deemed exempt. Okay, as it says here, unless the research involving those populations involve only observation. Only observation. All right. And then subpart E defines some of the IRB nomenclature and regulations and registration systems that the government has in place. All subject research must have approval and oversight from an IRB. In 2019, when the OHRP redid the Common Rule, it said that investigators, principal investigators, can self-determine if their research is exempt. But the caveat they say is don't be wrong, because they will impose penalties if you're wrong and if you misuse or abuse this ability, even if it's unintentional. Again, the safe way to protect yourself and, very importantly, protect the subjects is to get some information and have an IRB review. It's not mandatory in a lot of instances because, as the government has said, you can self-determine that your research is exempt. However, at ATSU, it is mandatory that all human subject research must be reviewed by an IRB. And as you're aware, there are two of them. There's the Kirksville IRB and the Mesa IRB. And between the two of us, we cover probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 to 500 applications annually that we review. Now, one of the things I want to emphasize about the IRB is its focus. The focus of the IRB is protection of human subjects, not facilitating research. All right. That being said, we also are not in the business of blocking research or making it more difficult. But our focus is to protect the human subjects that you as a research scientist or principal investigator want to use for your project. And we look at the risk benefit for the individuals, we look at the risk benefit for society, and we assure that subject participation is consensual. That means they're fully aware in a way that they can understand as an individual, and they agree to participate in what you want to do to them or with them. Again, an IRB is a local and objective review panel. The voting members of the IRB have to be free of conflict. They have to be composed for this, suitably composed for the subject matter that's going to be reviewed. And mainly what that deals with is a situation where if you're doing behavioral studies or sociological studies, the IRB that is reviewing it should have an expertise in that area. Okay, and we in Kirksville, we have a psychiatrist on our IRB, Dr. David Goldman, and a couple other people who are involved in that. We also have, the IRB has to have people from the community that are not involved in the institution. And we have several there that are not involved with the institution. There has to be competency for review of the science, excuse me, and the ethics, and adequate number and composition. The minimum number of members in an IRB by statute is 5. I believe we have 12 on our IRB. And again, the IRBs are local because the government allows the local communities to adjust the standards that they use to review and approve human subject research for their local community. So what's approved in Kirksville may not be approved in New York City or Los Angeles or San Francisco, and vice versa. That's why there are local IRBs established in communities. Now, one of the things is that, this just covers that. One of the things I do want to mention is that there are national and commercial IRBs. Several years ago, the government allowed the development of commercial IRBs and the utilization of commercial IRBs for people in circumstances where there is not a local IRB present, or if they want to use that. And a lot of times, some of the commercial IRBs review projects for drug companies and major research institutes where they're looking to have a broad base of subjects, maybe in multiple cities. So instead of going to each individual IRB in each local community, the government allows the principal investigator to choose one IRB to oversee everything, no matter where the location is. And a lot of times that will be done with a commercial IRB because they have resources that a lot of times local IRBs do not have to review and oversee research involved in multiple cities around the country and sometimes around the world. This is a chart that just a flow chart that is available from OHRP that allows investigators to look at their project and see if it is research, and if it is research, is it involve human subjects and so forth. The submission and review process for the local Kirksville IRB is as follows. You can request an IRB packet, excuse me, which is titled Information for Investigators. And you can do that by sending an email to Mrs. Lunan or me or Jane Johnson, who is the vice chair of the Kirksville IRB. And if you send it to me or Jane Johnson, we will probably forward it to Mrs. Lunan because she does most of the work anyway. And she will send you the package. The next step is to make sure you read information in the package. The first 20 some pages involve things like a description that we've gone through of what the IRB is, Belmont Report, Nuremberg Code, Declaration of Helsinki, and so forth. And these are the documents that really are the foundational documents after World War II that actually prompted the development of institutional review boards in this country. And then certainly then you prepare your application and submit it. The minimum application we're looking for is, as it says here, pages 26 to 33, and those involve the title page, an abstract in which you need to give us enough information that we can review everything and know what you are doing in detail. And then it goes through a number of questions. And then the last section that is minimal, again, minimal, is the fiscal conflict of interest disclosure that is mandatory in this country and in this institution. A lot of the pages in this information for investigators are descriptions of what you need to submit depending upon the intensity and the character of your application. There's an example informed consent document, and there's also a description of each section of the informed consent document and what it's supposed to cover. Then whenever you submit your application to us, we will review it and determine whether it's exempt, expedited, or requires a full review. And again, this is you can request an exemption or you can request an expedited review, but basically this is an IRB decision, and we make this decision depending based on whether the type of involvement the human subjects have and what you're actually looking to do to the human subjects. And there's a number of sections in the government regulations that guide that. For example, if you're going to draw any blood at all, even if it's just a small amount of finger prick to get a drop of blood to do some testing, that requires it to be an expedited review. Anytime you do any type of an invasive procedure, that will be an expedited review and it won't be exempt. As I said, anytime you use any of the protected populations like pregnant women or fetuses or children or prisoners, it will be a full review. Now, what that means is that, well, let's go back to this. What that means is that depending upon whether it's exempt, expedited, or full review, that determines how long it'll take for the IRB to make its decision. And then again, it's never too early to contact the IRB and ask questions if you need some answers. There are, as I said, there are questions in the shortened version or the minimum version, and there are 9 different questions asking whether you're going to use an investigational drug or medical device, things like that, whether there's radioactivity involved. Again, whether it's a surgical procedure and the type of surgical procedure it is, again, looking at the special populations. And one of the things that people don't recognize is that the government recognizes economically or educationally disadvantaged persons as specialized populations. And then under 8, will the research data, if it's a survey or interview or any type of collection of personal information, is it going to place the person at risk, such as a risk for criminal or civil liability, or is it going to damage their standing, their reputation, their ability to get employment, and so forth, or will it have the potential for revealing sensitive aspects of their behavior, such as drug use, sexual behavior, use of alcohol, and so forth. And if you answer yes to all of these, then that will end up being a full review. The other thing that we are concerned about, certainly in the IRB, is to make sure that there's some confidentiality for information that you get from people, even if it's not something that you think is sensitive, or even if it's not something that's really sensitive from an objective viewpoint. Is it something that's information that, as I mentioned earlier, is owned by the individual? And as a principal investigator, you have an obligation to protect that individual. That's what you're saying you'll do as you're doing research with them. Okay. Again, there are resources available, websites that can provide you with some information about things. Again, oversight for multiple site projects can be done with one IRB now because of changes in government regulations over the last few years. And again, we talked about the development of commercial institutional review boards. One of the things about commercial institutional review boards is that they do charge. They're not cheap. And it usually starts at about $1,000 just to review the project each time. So if you send them a project, they review it, send it back for more information. You send it back to them for a second review, you pay them again. One of the things they're looking at is making money, I guess. Anyway, again, this is the makeup of our committee with our chair and vice chair, administrative assistants, and and what we're trying to do is facilitate research, but our major role is protection of human subjects. Secondary role certainly is the protection of the institution, because we know that if something goes wrong, a member of the institution does something wrong, or there's a problem, we certainly, the institution certainly might be liable. And we're looking to make sure that you as a principal investigator have the training you need to be able to perform your study in an appropriate and safe manner, protecting the subjects, protecting yourself, and protecting the institution. Again, things that may go wrong. Sometimes you as a PI have to realize that the subject interests are not necessarily the same as yours. And as I said before, subjects have a right, or potential subjects have the right to say no. Yeah, they don't want to participate, or they thought they wanted to participate, and they have the right to say no in the middle of the project. And they can walk out, not come back, and you cannot take action against them. It is they own their information. Okay. Again, we talked about informed consent. The review can take anywhere from 30 minutes to 6 months. If it's exempt, usually it's a decision of the chair or the vice chair, and it can be done in a half an hour review or maybe a couple day review. If it's expedited, usually the chair or the vice chair will review it and look at it, and if need be, get an opinion from one or two other members of the IRB if needed, and that usually takes a few days. And then if it's a full review, it will take probably at least 2 to 3 weeks, sometimes longer. And the project is, the application is sent out to 2 to 3 reviewers to be formal reviewers, and then everyone else in the committee also gets a copy of it. And all members of the committee will review it. The committee will meet and discuss the project to make sure that we know the pros and cons of the project, the benefits, the problems associated with it, and so forth. We don't look at do a scientific review except in the light of risk benefit. If you're doing something that is somewhat risky to the individual, and we are concerned that the science of it is questionable to the point where the risk associated with what you're doing is not balanced for the benefit either of the individual or of society, then we will probably deny approval and probably provide information or guidance on what we think you need to do to improve your application, that we can approve it. We will provide you with information. A report is sent to the PI very quickly after the IRB makes their decision. And again, resubmission is with corrections and changes to make it more agreeable to the IRB are strongly encouraged. We are not here to facilitate research, but we're also not here to deter it. The other thing I want to say is the IRB is an independent body. It's not under the jurisdiction of the institutions. It's a federally mandated committee that has to be independent. And the IRB decision is final. There is no appeal. If we deny a project, deny approval of a project, the institution cannot go ahead and say, well, we're going to allow it to occur anyway. However, if we approve a project, sometimes an institution will, in fact, deny the permission for the investigator to do it under the auspices of the institution. And that's an institutional policy, nothing we can do. If we deem it safe from our viewpoint, then the final decision like that is to the institution. Very rarely does that come up, but sometimes it has come up in the past. Again, training is required by the IRB, by ATSU and by the federal government. City training is a very good program that we use at ATSU, and everyone that does human subject research has to go through city training and get a certificate. That certificate has to be sent in to the RGIS organization at ATSU, because they keep all of those on file, so we can document that you as a principal investigator or someone involved in human subject research have gone through the program and have been properly trained. Again, finally, volunteers grant permission with IRB oversight that is required. Prepare early if you're going to do human subject research. It's important that you have everything together before you submit your application, and we are more than willing to provide you with guidance and provide you with information to help you do well in preparation of your application and complete your research project. Again, the bottom line for us is protection of human subjects and making sure it's full consensual agreement to participate. I think that's it. Any questions?
No.
Anybody there? Yes, ma'am.
No questions.
No questions?
Hi, Dr. Theobald. This is Melissa Stewart.
Oh,
And
yes, Dr. Stewart.
I will just tell you that being a member of the IRB and being someone who's actually now written a grant that requires human subjects as part of the study subject matter, it's much different to be someone involved in writing a grant and being an IRB member. It's a lot more intricate, knowing your duties as a person that's writing the grant. So your advice to start early is very much appreciated. And I just wanted to say that part of that SITC or whatever training, I think I spelled it wrong in the comments there. Yeah, it has 17 modules, and to do it right, it takes hours to complete because I just did it last week, and it's quite onerous. So yeah, you need to set aside a little.
Yes, it can. I agree, Dr. Stewart. I agree.
Dr. Theobald is very helpful as far as writing an IRB proposal. And so he's a really good resource. So I encourage all the students on here to take advantage of his expertise.
Thank you for that comment, Doctor. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Hi, Dr. Theobald. This is Caroline Van Sickle.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
unfortunately was running late and missed the first part of this, and so I was just curious, will this be recorded? Or was this recorded and will be published somewhere?
I believe it was recorded. Who is doing that?
I'm recording it. I'm not sure what they want me to do with it. I will check with Deb as soon as we're done here.
Okay, okay, good to
Okay.
know.
Uh-huh.
And
And I
I-
also posted my email address in the chat if you missed it in the lecture PowerPoints. So if you do need a manual or a short form, you can just send me a request.
Will do. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Deborah.